Kids who ran away. What's your story? Serious. It was 3 weeks before my 18th birthday and I ran away to my older sister's house out of state. My mom was extremely abusive, physical and emotional, and told me that as soon as I turned 18 she was going to burn all my belongings. She made sure mention my driver's license, birth certificate, and social security card, and kick me out into the streets. She already stole all my money, since I wasn't legally old enough to have my own bank account, every month when I got paid, so I knew if she burned all my belongings I'd be ruined. I ran away while she went on vacation and took what belongings I could fit into my friend's car. I cashed out what money I had left in my account, less than $400, and hid at my sister's place in the meantime. My mom lied to the police and told them I was 16 years old, a drug addict, suicidal, and that I ran away with my 32-year-old boyfriend who was an armed drug dealer. The police found me 4 days before my birthday and tackled me to the asphalt, assuming I was armed. They were very angry when they booked me and found out I was almost 18 and clearly not on drugs or with any old man. Legally they had to send me back to live with my mother, so I stayed in custody for 3 days and was about to be transported back to her, but thankfully turned 18 before that happened. Turns out all the belongings I left behind were indeed burned, and my driver's license was suspended, since parents can legally do that to minors. Thank God I managed to save all the important things before she got her hands on them. I'm now 27, married, and pregnant. I went to so much therapy to work through all the trauma I experienced as a child and luckily managed to create a happy and successful life for myself. I haven't spoke to her since I ran away. I've seen her randomly over the years, like at my grandma's funeral, my little sister's high school play, and when I helped that same little sister move out of that awful house when she turned 18. I don't plan on including her in my life, ever. 16 years old. Lived with my dad, and after years of emotional abuse, he snapped and grabbed me by the throat. I can't remember much more. On autopilot, I took my wallet, phone and charger and just left. I didn't really have an idea of where to go, so I felt my best chances were going to the train station and see from there on. I got a response from a friend in another city where I could stay and wanted to leave town since I was scared and had the feeling the police were searching for me. They were. I had like 40 euros and to save money I decided to walk instead of taking the bus. Maybe the most movie moment out of my life is walking a long straight road with water next to it. We just have had a few hot summer days, and while the sun was going down, thunderstorms rolled in. Adrenaline worn off, and I realized I had pain and was limping. Headache, dizzy, but also an overwhelming feeling of liberation. It started to rain, and I realized my fuck up for not taking my coat. I only wore a t-shirt, and it was getting cold. In the distance, I saw a bus stop with one person waiting. Good. The last bus hasn't left yet. I must have looked like crap, cause the guy, like 40 years, waiting there started talking to me. I told him what happened, and he said he already felt weird energy around me. He offered a place to sleep, but I refused, cause old guy. Teenage girl. It felt weird. I refused and he understood. We smoked pot together. He paid for my bus ticket and exchanged numbers. I always regretted not taking the offer, but that's another story. The next day we hang out and he bought food for me. I decided to contact friends who were worried and promised them to come back. This story will always stay with me. It kickstarted major changes in my life, still affecting me today. I stood up for myself. Why do you regret not taking up that man's offer? What's happened to you since then? I hope you're doing alright. When I was in high school I lived with my dad after I moved from where I grew up because my mom wanted to move. My mom lived about an hour's drive away. This is relevant later. My dad started dating this woman who was extremely abusive. Unfortunately he and I are a lot alike in the way that we both are easily manipulated. Her and I got into a fight one night because she accused me of telling everything that was going on to my mom, whom I hadn't spoken to in months due to drugs. She slapped me across the face hard enough that her fake nails actually cut me as well. I pushed her over the coffee table and walked out. It was about midnight, so I didn't want to bother my friends. I walked about 4 miles before I got to the overpass of the interstate where I stopped to sleep a bit. The next day, I walked the rest of the way to my mom's house, which took about 10 hours. When I got to my mom's house, she was strung out, so I just turned around and left. I walked the 5 hours to Walmart and hung out for another 6 or 7 hours. And then I guess someone at Walmart had spoken to the cops that had stopped in, and they stopped to talk to me when they got my name and called it in. Apparently my dad had told his friend who was an officer that happened to be called by the neighbors following the fight the night before. So they asked about the cuts on my face and I told them, and they asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, because I didn't want my dad to be mad at me. They took me back, and it turns out that my dad kicked her out of the house immediately after I left, and he spent the whole night trying to find me himself. It made me proud of him, because the first time he actually showed some backbone in a relationship was because of me. Your dad is a good man. He is. We are now 12 years later, and he and my daughter are best friends, and it couldn't make me any happier. This story made me smile. You take good care of him and your daughter. That's the plan. Thank you so much. Had to have been about 5 or so. I remember getting mad at my mum. She wouldn't bake the store-bought cookie dough we got from the store earlier. I literally went out to find a stick, got a large handkerchief to throw my stuff in, and tied it like they did in old cartoons. Made it out about a mile until my dad found me. Same. Only I told my mom and she helped me pack. I was home for dinner. Don't know why, but mom did this too, and I find it very wholesome. I packed my Action Man backpack, walked out the door, looked down the street and got scared. Went back home, but had dreams about living on the street. They didn't seem fun. Happened when I was 16. My mother was abusive for so many years. I'd had a terrible few weeks. A friend of mine had died in a car crash. Another friend had been diagnosed with cancer and was going to lose his leg. And I'd been dealing with my parents arguing every day, the police being called to our house nightly and the pressure of upcoming exams. One night I was home alone with my mum, and I had come downstairs to get some water because I had a headache from crying. My mum stood at the bottom of the stairs and told me that she hoped my friend with cancer would die during the operation. So after years of just putting up with her abuse, I snapped a little and started punching and kicking at her chest, me being a few steps up from her. Obviously this was a bad idea on my part. I got beaten quite badly. Mum then went out. I don't really remember what happened immediately after, but I remember that an hour or so later I was sat on my bed knitting with blood running down my face and arms onto the yarn. It's a weird thing to remember. I'm pretty sure I was quite deeply in shock and my mind had just decided to pretend nothing was wrong for a while. Anyway, after this my sister had come home and had taken me to my aunt's house, where they took pictures of all the injuries in case I wanted to go to the police. I stayed there for a night, but felt like a nuisance. So the next night I told them that I was going to stay with a friend. Instead I went down to a local park and stayed there at night in a shelter. Looked kind of like a bus shelter with a bench. At night I sat up awake, paced a lot to keep warm. I felt very vulnerable there in the dark alone. Every morning I'd go off to school and then go back to the park. I wore makeup to mask my black eyes and told my teachers I'd had an accident in taekwondo, and wore long sleeves to hide the bruises and scratches. After school I'd nap in a sunny spot in the park. Honestly, it was peaceful there. I felt safer in the park than I had at home in years. I also had 2 sleepovers with friends during this week. I didn't tell them I was sleeping rough. I hadn't even told them about my home life. So yeah. After 5 nights at the park and 2 nights at friends' houses I was told my mum had left and moved somewhere else. I came back home and I didn't tell anyone that I hadn't been staying at friends' houses for all of that week. My dad never acknowledged what happened and continued to fight for the marriage for a while. I don't blame him though. I have to remember that he had been the victim of domestic abuse from my mother for years at that point. All in all, it was cold and scary and so tiring. But I found it to be peaceful and so much better than being at home while my mum was there.